Hello again and welcome back to Music and Mind, the interview series where I, Adam Ficek, speak with leading musicians about the intersection of music and mental health. Today I'm joined by Tom Hingley. Hi Tom, how are you doing?
I'm all right. I'm sat in the kitchen. You probably can't see this, but I've got a very impressive array of boxes in the background, which my wife Kelly won't be very impressed. We're in display. She works for the Musicians Union and she's working at Glastonbury Festival, so she's got an enormous load of goodies to give away, which I'm afraid I've kept in the view, in your purview, I'm afraid. Sorry about that, Adam.
I like it. I thought it was this background you purposely put on.
That's right, yeah. It's this special background thing that makes it look like I'm incredibly messy and our kitchen is incredibly messy, but it's not real.
It works. It keeps like a grounded ethos. I like it. So just to explore musically, what are you up to at the moment?
I'm sort of rambling on. I mean, I've been playing music. I'm 57. I've sort of been playing. I'm 58. A couple of weeks. I've sort of been playing music on and off for about the last 47 years. That's what I started when I was about 10. Probably best known as having been not the original, but the best known singer from Inspiral Carpets. Stephen Holt sang for the band initially when him and Graham started the band in 83, and then he left in 88. He auditioned Noel Gallagher and John used to be in the High, and they auditioned me and I got the job, and I stayed with the band for 23 years until 2011 when we had like a part in Other Ways. Stephen's back singing for them. But all the time I've been in quite a few different bands. Band called The Lovers. There's been two different bands called The Lovers, one with Jem Kelly, used to be in the Lotus Eaters, and another one that had Paul and Steve Hanley out of the Fall in it, Jason Brown and Kelly Wood, my wife. But I've also guested. I did a charity gig where I sang with Larry and David and Jimmy from James, and I recently guested on a couple of songs with the Blockheads in London in December. So I go out quite often as a solo musician. I have a band that plays Inspiral Carpets stuff called the Carpets, and I'm also doing this kind of side project with Gordon who I went to school with, which is called Mackay Hingley. So any week I'm probably doing one or two of these different projects all the time.
You've done an awful lot there. I'm always interested in, for me emotionally, how I'm impacted by what I call personal music-based stuff and occupational. Do you view it in the same way that some of the music involvement you have is more personal, but some is more like industry-based, or do you just view it as the whole thing together?
I think some of it's personal and some of it's industry-based. But I mean, I think one's view of so emotional, mental things is very much governed anyway, even before you get onto the way that music is processed, whether you think it's individual or let's use the word commercial or corporate, although corporate carries its own kind of associations with it. Before that, one's own concept of oneself and identity and mental health and stuff are tied up with your own pathology. Of course, mental health is partly about growth and it's about evolving beyond your pathology. So I think you don't necessarily it's easy to go through life and think that things are happening to people, and in fact you're an agent and you're the author of your story. So quite a lot of the time you are the sea, you're not the boat bobbling up and down in it, if that's not too much of a Confucius way of looking at it. You know what I'm saying? So an awful lot of what the problems that we have in life are our own reactions or things that come from within us. So like, so I'm getting a bit deep here, Adam, but like, you can get up in the morning or in the afternoon and you can get really upset about a friend or a business associate or your partner or whatever. But in fact, that's not a trigger. In fact, there's just some deep thing crawling out of your soul, some black hole crawling out of your soul. And what you're doing is it's like putting a suit on a coat hanger. You're kind of looking for some external trigger to blame it on. In fact, actually, it's coming from deep well from inside oneself.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. And how does music help that?
Well, music can help it because music, I mean, like playing music can be a liberation. Playing music can be, and I do meditation now, and we always talk about mindfulness. And so mindfulness is living in the moment or living in the body and not living too much in the mind. But playing an instrument can bring mindfulness, or playing an instrument can be in the zone where you kind of step outside what happened in the past or what might happen in the future. Writing songs can be cathartic. I mean, for example, this album I did with Gordon Mackay, got this little outfit called Tom Hingley. We did this album called Decades. And before the pandemic in 2019, his father and his sister died within 3 weeks of one another, and nothing to do with COVID. So he had his own kind of pandemic before the pandemic. Obviously, I couldn't see him throughout the lockdown year, but I saw him at the end of November 2021. He kind of was going through ideation, sort of suicidal. So we decided there and then. He said, it's my 60th birthday in January 19th, 2023. I don't know whether I'll reach there because everyone in the generation above me is dead. Everyone in my generation and my family is dead. I don't know whether I deserve to get there. I don't know whether I want to get there. So we went around him and said, look, we'll do a record to celebrate your 60 years. We'll call it Decades. We'll do 6 songs. We'll do a gig on his 60th birthday. And that's what we did. So music can be cathartic. So we wrote some songs about his mother who passed away and his dad and his sister, and some pretty dark stuff that's in very bad taste, but you wouldn't really know. That's what the songs are about. But I think music can be cathartic in that way. But music can also be a downer. I mean, I love the album Curtains by Tindersticks, but I wouldn't recommend putting it on because it's a sort of a breakup album, I think, and I think it could definitely send me under the icy depths, I think. So I think you have to be careful with music, because I think music can be cathartic or it can be uplifting. And there's certainly a place for melancholy in music, but it can also pull you down. So you have to be a little bit careful sometimes in what you're listening to, I think.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because my take on it is similar, where I think we're told this binary notion of music amazing and healing and the industry destructive. And my own experience and many of my peers is it's much more nuanced than that. What about the industry experiences? What are the good and the bad about those?
The thing about the industry was that we grew up in, I think you and me, we grew up in an age of physical sound carriers. So, vinyl, cassette, mini disc, CD, DAT or whatever. So we grew up in that where physical bits of plastic or vinyl were kind of bought or sold, could have been, I don't know, could have been cufflinks or something, but they were sound carriers. And that all ended when was there a single called Mishka? He did a song, and it was the first single that was available purely digitally for the charts. From that moment on, this is a very cynical take on it. You could basically, some dubious management team, and I'm not saying this happened with him, that is defamation, but some cynical management teams you could just link up 2 computers to buy a load of digital copies of singles from 2 or 3 shops and get to number 1 in the charts. So from that moment on, the charts are kind of scuppered. And then what happened then was the kind of music that traditionally had a more authentic background, like guitar bands or punk bands or indie bands or metal bands or rock bands, anything that wasn't TV advertised or wasn't mega pop, sort of then found the mainstay of its career playing live. So, of course, the very ultra pop side of business didn't want that. So they've polluted I've used that word, they polluted the festivals by taking over the festivals to the degree that really the headliners are a lot of what were traditional festivals are pretty meaningless now, really. That's not to say I don't like the music. I love pop music. I'm not that up to date on pop music. I get most of my kind of musical erudition from listening to Woman's Hour. I'm not claiming to be the new Alan McGee or something like that, or the old Alan McGee, or even the middle stage Alan McGee. So I'm saying that the industry used to be physical. It used to involve moving things around. Then it became virtual. Then there was a flight into authenticity or supposed authenticity by people playing festivals and gigs, and that has now been polluted by the really big players taking it over. So I'd say broadly, I've had a good experience in the industry. I was in bands from really the punk years onwards, and I was in a band before I was in Inspiral Carpets called Too Much Texas. We did a Peel session, and we supported New Order, House of Love, The Beloved, and I think the Pastels. So it must have been all right. But people think that the internet has acted as a way of removing gatekeepers. I don't think it has, because somehow we got hold of the phone number that was it wasn't Bush House in London, where John Peel used to do a show from. We just rang up the extension that was next to where he was DJing, and that's where we got hold of him. You would never, ever be able to do that. And the internet actually hasn't. I mean, in some cases it may have acted as a lever, but I don't think it has actually. I mean, speaking as a 57-year-old, embittered, fairly privileged, white middle class male, I'm not convinced that the internet has actually necessarily been a very good thing, actually, throughout all different aspects of the music industry and other parts of life as well. So I'd say, to go back to the beginning of your question again, if you ask me the question again, I will now give you a dead tight answer to your question. What was your question?
Remember the question, Tom.
Your question was, how do I have had a good experience in the industry? Yes, I have had a good experience in the industry, but it was a bit like, like I joined Inspiral Carpets in 1989. I wasn't their original singer or the singer they have now, although I didn't have all the hits with them, and really all the success that they had really was with me, really. And we had a manager who was called Anthony, and I don't think we would have been famous without Anthony, although we kind of fell out with him later. And the one thing I did was, everyone in Inspiral Carpets, when I was in that band, Clint, Boone, Graham Lambert, Craig Gill, now sadly deceased, and Martin Walsh, we were all quite good at business. And the one thing I did was, I said to them, they had a manager who said, oh, we see the manager like every 2 weeks. I said, well, that's not good enough, is it? We need to see him like twice a week. And from that moment on, we started having meetings more often. And I was quite pushy, really, in terms of trying to get things moving along. And we did, I've written a book about it called Carpet Burns, but we were being courted by a lot of labels in 1989. We were being courted by Sony, CBS then, Chrysalis, EG, which was Brian Eno's label, Zomba, and Dave Robinson used to run Stiff. But we didn't sign to any of those because the major labels, we felt that with Chrysalis, had nothing that we wanted to take out of their box room. We didn't want to hear their vinyl. I suppose the Blondie stuff would have been okay. I think they had the undertones, but there was nothing really we wanted there. And Sony were just too corporate. And we were worried that we weren't Happy Mondays, we weren't the Stone Roses, and we were worried that we signed to Sony or Chrysalis, they'd sign us for one record and then would drop us. And we couldn't sign to Factory because they were completely hopeless. The Factory, they signed the Had Joy division, the New Order, Happy Mondays, OMD for one single, James, Trinity Column, ACR, Northside, but they were entirely hopeless as a label. And I used to work at the Hacienda, and they were hopeless as a label. There's probably 250 dance records that they could have signed, like Ride on Time and all that stuff. They could have signed, and didn't sign any of it because it didn't fit in with their ideological underpants, their kind of, their ideological idea of what they were about, which is totally, utterly crazy. So we wouldn't have signed to Factory because we wouldn't have got priority within the label, because this would have worked on New Order and Happy Monday. So all we did was we hired a radio plugger, it was Nicky Kafalis, and TV plugger, and we hired their press agent, who was Jeff Barrett, who went on from Heavenly Records. We just paid him £450 a month out of gig fees, and that meant that we didn't need to sign to Factory. So we were really quite sussed about the labels. I think we knew the major labels would want to sign us and they'd drop us, so we signed to Mute Records. But we had quite a good experience. We made 4 albums with Mute, and then each record was selling less, to be honest. And it was always a boutique label, Mute, and so they kind of dropped us, and then they put out Greatest Hits. And the band went on a hiatus for 8 years and got back together in 2003. We made a lot of money touring, made a lot of money from T-shirts, made a lot of money from records. So I think, broadly speaking, we've had quite a good experience in the music industry. Although at that time in 1989, when we were being courted by major labels, we didn't tell any of them that we didn't want to sign to them, because they did take us out for an awful lot of free meals, and they didn't really seem any point in not telling them that we were not going to sign to them. And also we were learning more about the business by making out we wanted to sign to them. In fact, we had no intention of signing to them whatsoever. So it was a different business. I'd say there are some elements of it. What they try and do is they try and split up the band and say, who's the creative person in the band, or try and flatter the ego of who they think is the creative person in the band. So it's a bit like All for One and One for All. You're better off trying to stay together, really, inside the tent, really, than letting them split up the band or just promote one person,
Yeah. How is it different, I guess, mental health or emotionally, band experience versus what you do now?
Well, bands are sort of like, they're a really bizarre cross between like a foster family and kind of maybe the trenches in the First World War, although I'd say it's probably not as good manners probably as they were in the trenches in the First World War, because at least at once they stopped and played football at Christmas, didn't they? So I think with a band, you have to be prepared to punch someone in the face, or get punched in the face, and then 3 minutes later be playing the intro tape and going on stage. And like realistic. But bands, they bring camaraderie. You go through terrible. It always makes me laugh when people win I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, out of a band. And it's like, look, being in the jungle and being filmed by loads of people and having a whole soiree of carafes of very nice wine and brandy and probably cocaine just outside the remit of the camera is a lot easier than sitting in the back of a transit van and driving around Europe. So I think I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here is a bit, you're likely to win if you've been in a band, because any part of it is probably going to be better than doing a European tour, to be honest. But you know what I'm saying, you're smiling at what I'm saying. So to answer your question, bands, you have the whole camaraderie thing, you also have the downside of it. Solo career, you're free to do what you want, but you've only got yourself to let yourself down on stage. But I have been in a situation where, I've been physically threatened playing on my own, and there's the two things that always happens. I mean, maybe I'm not playing in the right place, but the things that quite often happens when you're playing on your own is that people expect you to be some kind of musical jukebox and play any piece of music that's ever been recorded, which I'm not really quite sure. You wouldn't get someone come and say, "Oh, could you just quote all of James Joyce? Could you just quote all of Finnegan's? Could you just quote all of Finnegan's Way? Can you do it in Polish?" No. So why would you be able to play a not particularly successful B-side by Robin came out in 2007? I'm not really quite sure why you'd be able to do that. That's the first one. And the second one, which is, if you've ever had a joiner around your house, or maybe someone fixing your car or something, if you start helping yourself to their toolbox, they're going to go absolutely, totally crazy. But you put that same person in a bar or a club, and they've had a couple of drinks. For some reason, they think it's perfectly all right to pick up your £1,500 guitar, and if they want to, smash it into 1,000 pieces. That seems to be completely de rigueur and completely okay, which I don't really get it. Don't really understand that. But generally speaking, bands, it's a bit of a warfare with high attention. And that can be healthy. I mean, no one wants to sound like Dire Straits, really. And no one really wants to sound like Oasis after their second album, do they, really? But, because you need a bit of tension, don't you, to be creative. And the reason why a lot of bands split up is because people don't want to share the limelight anymore. They don't want to stand on stage. They don't want to stand on stage and share the limelight with other people. And most people won't be honest about that, but I'm being honest about it. But I think bands, you've got to put up with other people. It can be a source of strength and great humour and laughing at oneself and other people. Playing solo can be okay. It can also be really tough because you sometimes put yourselves in a situation where you really are. You don't want to do the gig. You have to do the gig, or like after the pandemic and things started up again, I got COVID off to a couple that I was giving a selfie or an autograph to, and after that I wouldn't do autographs. The number of people who just went absolutely nuts with me because they seem to think that there's a constitution in Britain, and they seem to think in this constitution there's a very defined right to have selfies, which I'm not actually sure exists. I did a gig down in Falmouth, and these two couples came up to me and they wanted to have a selfie with me, and I said to them, "It's all right if we don't, because I've had COVID recently." And Les Carter was there at Carter USM, and they made a B-side. They went off to him, and he had a selfie with them, and went home. And then on Facebook Messenger 3 days later, I got a message from Les. He said, those two couples ago. I said, "Yeah." I said, "They gave me COVID." So there is I'm not really talking about mental health too much, but there is another problem which you'll be aware of, which is that you exist in an organic sense, as in, you and me wake up and we may do things. We get up, we go to the toilet, we eat something, a bar or whatever, and that's like our organic self. But if you've been in any kind of band that's had any success, you also have a kind of mythic mantle, a mythic kind of personality that doesn't relate to your organic one. So, for example, the number of times where I haven't played in the Inspiral Carpets for 15 years, and they've toured very successfully with Stephen Holt since 2011. The number of people who claim they saw me sing the 2012, and they didn't. And no amount telling them that I wasn't there will make them believe. And the number of really quite overweight Scottish people who tell me that I've beefed up and I look old, and you say to them, there's a really famous story about Dr. Robert and the Blow Monkeys. The promoter used an old picture of him, and he was so good looking, and like now it just looks like me or something. It just looks like, a regular sort of 60-year-old bloke or something, And these women came up to him and started saying that they wanted the money back because in the advertising he looked really young. And they were really, this is a story I've heard. It's an apocryphal story. It's not a story that I'm telling myself. So anyway, these sort of 40, 50-year-old women said to me, you look a right mess. We want our money back because you don't, a bit overweight, you don't look young. To which she said, have you had a look at yourselves recently? At which point they got incredibly offended.
But we've covered a lot of ground there, Tom. So thank you very much. So the last question is, what does music mean to you?
But I think music can be anything. It can be talk, it can be footsteps, it could be this white noise you hear in your ear if you just play too much music. So music can be everything and anything. It's sort of incremental. And it can be very, and again, sorry, the other thing about music is, that because it's not taught universally in schools, which it should be taught, because it's not, people also think that ability is really important, and ability isn't necessarily important. What's important is an appreciation of the art form. So, like, you might not be able to play an instrument, but if you love some music that I completely loathe, if you can't play any music at all, but you love Razorlight, that's better than if you don't love anything at all. So I think an appreciation of music is, again, that's people. I think people don't realise that a love of something is actually valid.
That was my interview with the very insightful Tom Hingley. Thanks for listening to Music and Mind with me, Adam Ficek. Don't forget to check out Tonic Music and their amazing website, workshops, free groups, courses for both musicians, people in the industry, and music fans.